Okay, so to recap, we must look back. We went to the faith of Abraham, and what the faith of Abraham is mentioned in Hebrews. By him mentioning it, we should have known what we know, what we've just read about Abraham. Why? Because in Hebrews it says he was called by God. Called from where? Out of the Ur of the Chaldeans. Was his mother and his father a Hittite and an Amorite? No, they were just called a Hittite or Amorite because that was the land of their nativity. Just in the same way that Moses was called the Egyptian, even though we know he was not Egyptian, he just grew up in the house of Pharaoh, correct? So, just to recap, let's just read some more examples of what I'm trying to show you. So, quickly go to Genesis 14, verse 13.
Genesis 14:13 says, And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram.
And there came one that escaped and told Abraham the Hebrew, right? He's a Hebrew I wiped it out of Shem, remember? He's out of Shem's line, the Hebrew. For he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite. He is not himself an Amorite, nor is his parents an Amorite. That's just where he dwelt. But he is the Hebrew amongst what? The Amorites. Shem's whole line, Hebrews. They preserve it. They get taught that language. It gets taken away. It's got to do with the Tower of Babel, which we'll get into, and the language is being reverted or perverted or whatever you want to call it. But the Hebrew living in the land of the Amorites. So we just showed you earlier Amorites is out of Amori, and Het, the Hittites are out of Het, which are all out of the land of Ham. Nothing to do with the line of Shem. Nothing whatsoever. Regardless of what you say, the scripture will always disprove you. Okay? So, that being said, God, sorry, I'm closing that. I'm just opening something. Right, in the same way that we read earlier, remember how we read how Moses, the other one, how Moses was called the Egyptian, even though he was a Hebrew. He just grew up in Egypt. That's why he's called Egyptian, because they are named after the land of their nativity. Now, remember what I said. We must remember this whole context. Remember where we are. We are now in the days of Abraham here. And there are many nations and people. And Shem's line is all over. There are wars going on and disputes going on. But they are not all in one place. They are all scattered. Some live in Egypt. Some live in Amori or the land of the Amorites. Some live in Ur. They are all over the place. They are not yet gathered to their inheritance again. Okay, so always keep that in mind. This is the history behind what we said we need to know when we search these scriptures. When we read what the author says in Hebrews, that we must be like Abraham, who was called. From where? From Ur of the Amorites. Not that he was one, he was just called from there. We ought to know these things when we read the New Testament. If we do not know it, we should not read it. Because the New Testament is leaning on the understanding that you've done the study and you know all of this. So now in context, you know exactly what they are saying. Right? So quickly go read, for another example, in Numbers 26, verse 59.
Okay. And this verse 59, it says, And the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, and the daughter of Levi, whom her mother bare to Levi in Egypt. And she bare unto Amram Aaron and Moses, and Miriam their sister.
Okay? Now, stop and pause when we read this. Where are we in time? Was Moses and them at Mount Sinai? No, this is before. Way before. This is in the days of Egypt, and there's a reason that they are in Egypt. We'll get into that, right? But this is before. And note what it says there. And it says the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed. the daughter of Levi, one of the 12 sons of Abraham, Levi, whom her mother bore to Levi in where? In Egypt. So Levi could have been called the Egyptian, the land of his nativity, right? In the same way, I am living in Africa and I am called an African. It's exactly the same thing happening in Scripture. We can apply this logic in real terms, but somehow when we read Scripture, we can't apply it. We've just proven to you that you have to apply it and you have to go check the genealogy to know. Never mind, we'll get there, right? I want to go and open for you, give you a New Testament example about the Samarians. Right? We're gonna go read John chapter 4. John chapter 4, we're gonna read verse 5 all the
It
way
says,
to verse 12.
Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the parcel of the ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there, and Yeshua therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat on this well, and it was about the 6th hour. There came a woman of Samaria to draw water, and Yeshua saith unto her, Give me a drink. For his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then said the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest a drink of me, which am I a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. And Yeshua answered her and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of Yahweh, and who it is that he saith to thee, Give me a drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee of the living water. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which has given us the well, and drank thereof himself and the children of his cattle?
Okay. Now in this, there's a lot of things. You'll see how the Apocrypha is going to give us the answers to it as we go to it. But there's a lot of things. Now, we were in the time of Abraham. Now we've jumped forward in the time of the Messiah. And a lot of things happened since Abraham, the covenant at Mount Sinai, Israel in the promised land. Israel gets divorced. And once Israel, first 10 of the 12 tribes are divorced, right? Benjamin and Judah was still there. The Messiah comes out of Judah. And now Israel is divorced, right? But Israel consists of 12 tribes. As in the same way that Ishmael became a great nation, 12 tribes, right? But Judah, or Israel, you get Abram, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob's name is changed to Israel, and he gives birth to the 12 tribes, right? So let's say, I'm just going to shorten this and say 1 to 12, okay? These are 12 tribes. Now, when we read this, it says there, then he came to a city of Samaria, Samaritans, right? Which is called Shigar. After Shigar is in the genealogy of Ham. That's why it's called Shigar. Near to the parcel of the ground. And Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Right? Now Jacob's well was there. The well of Jacob. Remember how Jacob dug the well? That's the well. Now if we go all the way down, it says there, then said the woman, the Samarian woman, to him, how is it that thou, being a Jew, Judah, the Messiah being from the lion of tribe of Judah. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. He's out of Judah. Okay? But you've got Levi, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Issachar, and so on and so forth, right? The tribes. At that time, Judah was not divorced. Judah did not mix with any of these because they were the only ones kept holy for the sake of the Messiah being born out of Judah. Right? No. These are all divorced, but they are the brothers of Judah. Right? There are 12 tribes, and these 12 tribes consist of 12 tribes, whereof the Messiah is out of Judah. You being a Jew, what do you have to do with us? She's one of these tribes. Let me show you. Okay?
Hey, brother, can you move your camera to the left a little bit? Because nobody can see it, and I didn't want to interrupt you while you were talking.
That's to the left.
Yeah, that should be good. Let's see. You guys see that?
Maybe it was like this earlier. Right? You don't actually have to see. I'm just saying, at that time there were 12 tribes, and the covenant on Sinai was given to 12. God divorces 10 of that 12, remained with 2. One was Judah, other one was Benjamin. Benjamin also is scattered beforehand after Nehemiah, and only Judah then remains. Judah is not divorced. But you got Levi, Dan, Naphtali, Zachar, Gad, all the other tribes are now divorced, right? So now you only have Judah. Now the Jews cannot mix with them because they are the only ones who are not divorced. They are now seen as unclean because God divorced them. Said, you are called Lu'ami, no longer my people. You have become like an unclean thing. So he scatters them amongst the Gentiles. Okay? So then the Samarian asked him, you being a Jew out of Judah, how is it that you're speaking to us? She's out of one of these tribes, right? Here's the clue, right? Verse 12. Art thou greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well? So if her father is Jacob, Abram, Isaac, Jacob, who is called Israel, and out of Israel, the 12 tribes, at this time when she's speaking, the tribes are divorced, only Judah remains, and she's saying, are you greater than our father, these tribes' father, Jacob? But she's called a Samarian woman. Why is she called a Samarian woman? Is it because she's out of the line of Shem, of a Samarian? No. Exactly why Abraham and his parents were called Hittites. Why Moses was called the Egyptian. This is why she's called a Samarian, because she proves, she's saying, are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well? Who's the sons of Jacob? So obviously she's out of one of them. And the Messiah, who's out of the line of Judah, came to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, of Jacob. So she's one of these lost sheep, and the Messiah is saying to her, give me some of that water. And she's saying no. And then she eventually answers him, we know that a Messiah must come and teach us all things. They know because they are out of the seed of who? Jacob, and they follow the prophecy, and they know that someone must come to redeem the bride. It's called the wedding covenant. It's on my page, it's on Adrian's page. There's a short video on here. Be familiar with it. When we read these things, that's why I always say the wedding covenant is so important. So now, we are so far forward in time that we are now in the New Testament. Now, in the same way that Moses was now called the Egyptian, but he's a Hebrew, he's out of the line of Shem, and not out of the land of Ham, Mitzrayim, or Egyptian, right? He is called the Egyptian because that's the land of his nativity. Now, when Yahweh scattered the other tribes, he scattered them amongst all nations, and the people occupied the name of those nations to themselves. Hence, she is now called a Samarian woman. But she can be out of Naphtali. But she is called a Samarian woman. Why? Because her father is Jacob. Jacob became Israel after he wrestled with the angel, and he gives birth through his loins to his 12 sons. 12 in total. She is one of those lost sheep tribes who was divorced, because her father is Jacob. Following? Okay?
Yes.
So,
they say they can't see side B if we're going to use that board. They can see A, but they can't see B. So you're going to have to bring your screen right up to the edge of it, of A. There you go.
Okay? So it's not important. I'm just drawing in general because my mind works in pictures. But when I'm speaking, you should know what I'm saying, right? So there's a concept that you must always remember when we're doing these scriptures, and I want to draw that concept. I drew it earlier. I'll draw it just now. It's still wet. Once it dries off, I want to show you a concept that you must always remember. Okay, so in John 4 verse 9, the woman says, Then said the woman of Samaria to him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, Judah, ask drink of me? Who am I, a woman of Samaria? But her father is Jacob. For the Jews have no dealings with the Samarians. Why do the Jews have no dealings with the Samarians? Their brothers and sisters live amongst them. They have become like the Gentiles, the unclean thing, right? Now, this is what Acts is about. So I'm going to quickly explain Acts just shortly, right? I've got a video about Acts and unclean food. You can go watch it. But in Acts chapter 10, something happens. Cornelius, being a Gentile, let me quickly draw this concept for you before I do Acts. So, Jacob is Israel. He has 12 sons. A covenant is locked with 12 sons. 10 of those 12 sons get a divorce letter before the Messiah returns. So 10, so there's 2 left. Eventually only Benjamin and Judah remains. Eventually Benjamin gets a divorce and only one remains, which is Judah, or as common tongue says, Jews. Jews. Judah, Jews. Why? Out of Jacob, the 12 sons, and the one is left. Right? Now, this concept is in a circle. And if you take the circle and you draw like a pie chart and you divide it into 12. There's not 12 now, but look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In this time that it happens, when the Messiah comes, all that remains
Judah
is one piece of the pie. This lost sheep of the house of
Israel.
Jacob, the Samarian woman just told you she is. That is what remains. Now, if you go to Acts, Acts is after the resurrection of the Messiah. He came to finish the work. What was the work? The finish was to bring Israel, the hearts of the children, back to the Father, the wedding covenant. And what happens in Acts is the example. So in Acts chapter 10, you get a guy called Cornelius, who was a Gentile. He was one of these, right?
Lost sheep.
Cornelius and his whole household feared God. Fearing God biblically means to keep his commandments, to walk in his statutes and his ordinances, just like Abraham did in Genesis 26:5. This Gentile Cornelius does this. And he is commanded, listen to this word, to go down to Joppa. We read about it a lot in the Apocrypha. This place called Joppa. And he has to go call on a guy named Simon Peter. Now Simon Peter, Israel, Simon Peter goes to this Cornelius, and Simon Peter falls into a vision or in a dream. And in this dream, he sees a blanket coming down out of heaven, knitted on all 4 corners. It's part of his vision. That detail is important. Why? Because Yahweh said, I will scatter you, Israel, out of this land to all 4 corners of the world. So on this blanket is knitted with all 4 corners, because that's where Israel is scattered to all 4 corners of the world. And on this blanket is all manners of beasts, fowls, and animals, representing the other 11 tribes, the lost sheep. They are unclean animals. You are no
Brother,
longer mine. You are divorced. You are called Luami, no longer mine. Right? They are divorced from the alienated from the commonwealth of Israel. God divorced them, meaning they no longer belong to him. But through the Messiah, we can go back in and be grafted back into the olive tree, meaning you had to have come from it before. If you were part of the olive tree, you would have been seen as a green branch or a tender branch. And if the branch is broken off, you are now dry. Right? Okay? That's why it says it's the tame olive tree. It's tame because it's also part of the sheep. They are just lost. They can be easily grafted in. Now this Cornelius and his vision that he has, this blanket that comes down, resembles the other 11 tribes. And Simon Peter is told 3 times to say, Simon Peter, get up and eat. And he says, not so, my Lord, for no unclean thing has ever come into my mouth. Someone forget to inform him that all foods are now clean, because this is way after the resurrection of the Messiah. So it's not about food. And when he goes up to the roof, he became very hungry, this Simon Peter. And he goes into this trance and this dream, and he dreams about this blanket coming down. And all of a sudden he wakes up, and 3 men call him. 3 men are at the door that were sent by Cornelius to call on Simon Peter. And Yahweh then tells him, do not doubt this dream, because you doubted earlier about the unclean animals. Do not doubt this one. Go down and meet them. The blanket came down 3 times, hence the 3 men knocking on the door. Don't doubt this vision, because he thought it was about food to eat, but it had nothing to do with food. It had to do with the lost sheep of the house of Israel being able to come back into the covenant with Yahweh, because the Messiah finished that work. They can now come back in. So he goes to and he meets these people. And listen go to Acts chapter 10, verse 28. Quickly read
yeah,
it.
I'm gonna go to. I'll read 28, but you're gonna have to fix the board because people are they're not hearing what you're saying and they're worried about the board.
Don't leave
Right.
the board, people. You don't have to see the board. Just listen.
That's what I said. That's what I said. All right, verse 28. It said, and he said unto them, you know how that is unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come unto one another a nation. But Yahweh hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean.
So the unclean animals on the blanket was resembling the lost sheep. And note what he says. You know how it's not a common thing for a man who is a Jew to have company with any of the nations or Gentiles. Remember the Samarian woman said the same thing to the Messiah? And she replied, but are you greater than our father Jacob? Right? Are you? Now in this vision with Cornelius, the same thing is happening. Cornelius doesn't go to his brothers, to the lost sheep. He keeps casting his net to the one side of the boat, only to the Jews who are not divorced, this piece of the pie. Only to them. They are not divorced, but he keeps preaching to them. And the Messiah comes in the morning and says, have you any meat for me? Say no. He says, take that net and cast it to the other side of the boat. Start casting it to your brothers and sisters who you think is unclean. And they start casting it to the other side, the other tribes, the lost sheep. And they gather many fish. And with this many fish, they start dividing the fish into vessels, and the unclean they cast away, and the good they keep. This is the whole parable in the New Testament that you should know through what we just did in the Old Testament. Then these things become very, very clear. It's called prophetic speech. Okay? So, Peter then says, it's not a custom and a good thing for a man who is a Jew to have communion or anything with the Gentiles. Exactly like the woman told the Messiah. Because only the Jews were left. They weren't allowed to mingle because they saw their brothers and sisters as an unclean thing. But they didn't realize through the blood of the Messiah they can now come back into covenant. They are seen as a virgin. They are born again. They can come back in through the blood of the Messiah. Back to the promise. No longer alienated from the commonwealth of Israel. This is what Peter and them, the vision of Peter is all about. Okay? So, for context on Peter and what I explained now, could we, I I'll quickly go read John, and then we're going to go read the whole Peter chapter 10, just so you can be familiar with what I just said. Now, in John chapter 10, from verse 30 to 37, I'll read that, Adrian, and then after that, we'll read the whole chapter 10 of Acts.
Okay.
And Yeshua answering said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho to fall amongst robbers, who stripped him of all his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down certain priests on the way, and when they saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samarian, remember the Samarian woman at the well? Certain Samarian, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went with him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn or a lodge, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host, and said unto him, take care of him, and whether thou spend more, and when I come again, I will repay you. Which now of these 3 things thou was a neighbor to him that fell amongst the robbers? And he said, he that showed mercy to him. Then said Yeshua to him, go and do likewise. It's the whole story of Acts chapter 10 summed up. There's a guy. One guy passes a guy that is wounded, and a Levite also passes them. Remember, Levi are not part of the 12. They are bought free. They are counted outside the 12. The high priests were Levites. So the priest only cared for the Jews who were not divorced. And the Jews only cared for the Jews because that was their brothers. The other 12 tribes were divorced. But now the Messiah is saying, no, you lost sheep. You think you are good. Look at your brothers and sisters. Also, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons, the lost sheep. Who's got compassion? Yeah, they have. Why are you boasting in yourself? Can that branch also not be cut off? One of the 12 branches. Can they also be cut off? Yes. So he's telling them, no. Cast your nets now to your brothers and sisters, the lost sheep too. Exactly what the prophets say. So with this context, let's go read Acts chapter 10, the whole chapter, and Cornelius and his vision, and get better understanding before we continue.
Okay. It says, there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout man, and one that feared Yahweh with all of his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to Yahweh always. And he saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of Yahweh coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked, he was afraid, and he said, what is it, master? And he said unto him, thy prayers and thy alms are come up for a memorial before Yahweh. And now send men to Joppa, and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. And he lodged with one Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. And he shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do. And when the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants, a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them unto Joppa. On the morrow, as they went on their journey, they drew nigh unto the city, where Peter went up to the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry, and would have eaten. But while they were made ready, he fell into a trance. And he saw heaven open, and a certain vessel descending upon him. And as it had been a great sheet knit in the 4 corners, and let down to the earth, wherein there were all manner of 4-footed beasts on the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, unalive, and eat. But Peter said, Not so, master, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Then the voice spake unto him again a second time, What Yahweh hath cleansed, that thou callest now not uncommon. This was done thrice, and the vessel I was received up again into the heaven. Now, while Peter doubted within himself what the vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him, for Cornelius had said, Behold, I am he whom ye seek. What is the cause wherefore you are come? And he said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth Yahweh, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned from Yahweh by a holy angel to send for 3 into his house, and to hear the words of thee. Then called he them in and lodged with them. And on the morrow Peter went away with them, and a certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. And the morrow after they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them, and he had called together his kinsmen and near friends. And Peter was coming in, and Cornelius met him, and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up, I myself also am a man. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together. And he said unto them, You know how it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come unto one another nation. But Yahweh hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Therefore came I unto you without gainsaying, as soon as I was sent for. Ask therefore for what intent you have sent me. And Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting unto this hour. And at the 9th hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing, and said, Cornelius, thy prayer is heard, and thy alms had in remembrance in the sight of Yahweh. Send therefore to Joppa, and call hither Simon, whose surname is Peter. He is lodged in the house of one Simon, a tanner, by the seaside, who when he cometh shall speak unto thee. Immediately therefore I sent to thee, and thou hast well done that thou art come. Now therefore are we all here present before Yahweh to hear all things that are commanded thee of Yahweh. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, Of a truth, I perceive that Yahweh is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him, that worketh righteousness, is accepted with him. The word which Yahweh sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Yeshua Messiah, he is master of all. That word, I say, ye know, which was published throughout all of Judea, and began from Galilee, after the baptism which John preached, how Yahweh anointed Yeshua of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and with power, who went about doing good and healing all that were oppressed of the devil, for Yahweh was with him. And we were all witnesses of these things, which he did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. Him Yahweh raised up on the 3rd day and showed him openly, not to all people, but unto the witnesses chosen before Yahweh, even unto us, who did eat and drink with him after he rose from the dead. And he commanded us to preach unto the people, and to testify that is which was ordained of Yahweh, to be the judge of the quick and dead, to give all the prophets.
Sorry, Adrian.
No
You read the
problem.
important part. So this is what I was trying to explain. Peter is shown the vision on the blanket. And Cornelius, who's a Gentile, part of the lost sheep, can come in. But note how Peter, I want you to understand this and see this picture and how beautiful it is. He is called for Peter because Cornelius God fearing, he keeps the commandments of God. And the reason he's called to Peter, Bar-Yona, or Peter, is to tell, so Peter can tell them, those who are converted and keep the commandments of God and are obedient. The reason why is to tell them, listen, the Messiah died. God raised him from the dead. You who thought you were alienated from the covenant, the lost sheep, you can come back in. That's why Peter said, I must show God shows no respect of men. Why? Because of all nations, men will be accepted. What other nations he's speaking about? There, read there when out of Israel. Right? Read that part again. Out of Israel.
Uh,
So he's speaking there, the nations of Israel. Let me quickly open my Bible and show you. It will be in Afrikaans, but you read it just now.
at the end?
Yeah, just before
Yeah,
I
I
say.
know I emphasized on it. I'm trying to find what verse it is.
Read there from verse 34 to 36.
Okay. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, Of a truth I perceive that Yahweh is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. The word which Yahweh sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Yeshua Messiah, who is master of all.
So who's all the nations? The children of
Israel.
Israel. In each nation. Why? Because they were divorced. They are called lost sheep. Believe the Messiah when he says, I have come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Why are you doubting the words of your Messiah? Or are you doing exactly what the pagans do and saying, you see, Abraham was a Hittite because he's out of the Hittites. That's what you are doing. Peter is then told to cast his net to the other side, his brothers and sisters, and start gathering of them too. Hence, him preaching to Cornelius, telling Cornelius, listen, Cornelius, the Messiah died. God rose him on the third day. You are no longer alienated from the covenant. Later on, you see the Spirit poured onto them, to those who are what? Obedient. The Spirit is only given to them who are obedient. That's why Peter is called. So Peter can go and cast his net to the other side of the boat. The other 11 tribes. As it was commanded to who? Israel. Because Israel, through Abraham, becomes a multitude of nations.
Nation.
Now in this 12 tribes, which we'll cover, I want you to see this picture. Even though there are 12 tribes. This whole circle is made up of 12 tribes. Right? In those 12 tribes, you have different tribes. For example, Judah consists of 6 different tribes under it, but they all fall under Judah. The tribes are named differently. They are different multitudes of nations. Right? In Gad, under Gad, you've got 11 tribes, not named Gad, they are named other tribes, but they fall under the banner of Gad. So you have tribes within the tribes, which we'll cover, right? So now these nations, the context of what this vision is, as it was preached unto Israel, I will divorce you, I'll scatter you to all nations, the blanket with the 4 corners, and the unclean animals, Israel, the lost sheep. I'll scatter you to all nations, you've become like an unclean thing to me, God has divorced you. I will gather you from all the nations. What? I will gather you out of all the nations. Hence the woman at the pit saying, our father Jacob gave us this well. Are you greater than him? Gentile like Cornelius, coming back into covenant. Taking the hearts of the children and bringing them back to the father. Okay? This has got a lot to do with the wedding covenant, so I don't want to go into deep on that. I'm just showing you a picture overall so we can all understand. So, the question now is, of course, there are people called Amorites, Hittite, Egyptian, all these names of other nations, but they are not of the nations. They live in them, but they are not of them. They are not descendants of their blood. They are the descendants of Shem because they are scattered to all four corners. They're living amongst them in the same way that Abraham lived as a Gentile amongst the other nations. Okay? So, quickly. 1 Maccabees, chapter 5.
Hang on one second. First Maccabees.
I can read out of Maccabees. I think I've got it open, Adrian.
I got it. Okay, chapter 5.
25
The whole chapter?
to 28.
Oh, 25 to 38?
25 to 28.
Oh, 25 to 20. It says, they encountered the Naphtalians who met them peaceably and told them all that had happened to their kindred in Gilead. Many of them have been shut up in Basra and Bazor and Eliam and Capso, Maked and Carnium. All towns were strong and large, and some have been shut up in the other towns of Gilead, the enemy, and are getting ready to attack the strongholds tomorrow and capture and destroy all these people in a single day. Then Judas and his army quickly turned back into the wilderness of the road to Basra, and he took down the town and unalived every male by the edge of the sword, and he seized all the spoils and buried it with the fire.
I'm not sure. Just read verse 1 quickly again.
When the Gentiles all around heard that the altar had been rebuilt and the sanctuary dedicated as it was before, they became very angry.
Okay, yeah, carry on reading. So the Gentiles are angry because they're rebuilding the altar. Carry on.
And they were determined to destroy the descendants of Jacob who lived amongst them. So they began to unalive and destroy among the people.
So the Gentiles of Jacob live amongst the heathen, right? And they are starting to become obedient and build the altars again and do all these things. And the Gentiles are angry. They want to destroy them because amongst them live the descendants of Israel. They live amongst the Gentiles. Hence they are named after the places where they grow up and where they live. Same thing happens with Caleb. Okay? So now I want you to go to Genesis chapter 50.
Genesis 50.
We're going to read there from verse 22 to 24.
Okay. It says, and Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, the children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, who brought up upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and Yahweh will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob.
So in this time, Joseph lives in Egypt. Remember, he was given rulership under Pharaoh to live in Egypt. Even though his father and his brothers that came out, they lived in the land of Goshen. Joseph stayed in Egypt. And in Egypt, his household there was seen as royalty of what he did, the 7 good years and the 7 bad years. He prepared. And all the Egyptians loved Joseph because Joseph led them and helped them out of this famine, right? And his household, Joseph, was seen as a royal seed in Egypt. No one touched them. No one did any harm to them. They could live as royalty, even though another Pharaoh raises up that doesn't like Joseph. His descendants weren't touched. They always lived in Egypt. Hence, they were called Egyptians. But we know they aren't Egyptians. They are of Abraham's line, correct?
Yep.
So, with that being said, this is why I mentioned Caleb earlier, because people get so hung up on Caleb, right? Quickly go to Numbers chapter 32, verse 12.
32:12. Save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenzanite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed Yahweh.
Was Caleb a Kenizzite? Question. Was Moses Egyptian? Was Abraham a Hittite? Was the Samarian woman a Samarian? Was Cornelius a Samarian? No. They are named from the people they are called from. Okay? How do we know? Well, in the genealogies you can prove it, but just quickly go to Numbers 13, verse 2 through 6.
All right, 2 through 6. And it reads, Send thou men that they may search the land of Canaan, which I gave unto the children of Israel. Out of the tribe of their fathers shall you send a man, every one a ruler among them. And Moses, by the commandment of Yahweh, sent them from the wilderness of Paran, and all those men who were heads of the children of Israel. And these were the names of the tribes of Reuben, Shema, the son of Zachor; of the tribe of Simeon, Saphat, the son of Hori; of the tribe of Judah, Caleb, the son of Jephaniah; of the tribe of Issachar, Ilgal, the son of Joseph; of the tribe of Ephraim, Oshea, the son of Nun.
So, for example, it says there, one of each tribe again, right? So, one of Simeon, Levi, Dan, and then one of Judah was one of each tribe, and his name is Caleb. Or is Caleb a Kenizzite and is not from Judah? Did God lie? So if Caleb is not of Judah, so who was representing Judah then? Because there's no blood or sacrifice or anything happening for him to be grafted in. It's not happened yet. Or is Abraham a Hittite? That's what your logic is telling you. Because he's a Kenizzite, because he's from the area and it's tribe, it's under tribes. Now all of a sudden he's not one of the 12 tribes, yet he resembles Judah. Have we become sick in our minds? Where's our logic gone? If it says he's out of Judah, go and test if he's out of Judah. Do not say, well, he can't be part of the tribes. How insane have we got? Or is Moses the Egyptian, by your logic? Right? Because this is the logic that people have. Because Moses is called the Egyptian, that means he must be Egyptian. But he was Hebrew speaking. He was out of the line of Shem. He was not out of the line of Ham. Ham had Mitzrayim, one of his sons. Egypt, Mitzrayim. Moses is not out of Mitzrayim, he's out of Shem. Why is he called the Egyptian, people? Why? Because he was out of Mitzrayim? Was he out of Put or Canaan? Or Ham? No. He was out of Shem, people. The scriptures are true. Let's carry on. Now, we read earlier about this Joseph, right? There's a whole backdrop of Joseph and history that we need to know. We're going to go into it. But Joseph gets anointed by Pharaoh to be king, and when he does this, he rules because of the 7 good and 7 bad years. Actually, his brothers sell him, and he becomes a ruler in Egypt. And he's seen as good faith by the people of Egypt, right? Pharaoh has good acknowledgement towards Joseph. At that time, Mitzrayim, right? Ham's line. But then eventually another king rises up, another Pharaoh, and this Pharaoh despises Joseph. And we need to know this history so we can understand, because this happens before they are led out of Egypt into the land promised to Abraham, who was called out of the land of the Ur of the Chaldeans. This history also needs to be known. So that being said, we're quickly going to jump down to Exodus quickly. Exodus chapter 1. We're going to read verse 8 through 19. And this is in the time when Joseph ruled in Egypt and what happened thereafter.
Okay, let's see. Highlight 18. All right. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, and let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when they falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so let them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And he made their lives bitter and in hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherewith they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the names of the other Puah. And he said, when you do the office of the midwife to the Hebrew woman, and you see upon them of the stools, if it be a son, then you shall unalive him. But if it be a daughter, then you shall let them live. But the midwives feared Yahweh and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done this thing and saved the men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered. The midwives come in unto them.
So, in all of this, there's also a backdrop that we're not given the background picture. The first question is like we read in Hebrews, Abraham had faith and he was called. Where? Why are we not asking the question? Where was Abraham called from? What faith did he have and what did he do? This is exactly the same thing when we're reading this. So they rose up a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. What happened there? That question needs to be answered. And they brought the Israelites into bondage. The Israelites existed way before the covenant was given on Mount Sinai. But why must they now go into bondage? What happened? What's the backdrop of this whole story? And what were the Israelites doing in Egypt in the land given to Ham? Right? Ham's descendants, and that portion of the land was given to one of Ham's sons, who's called Mizraim, right? Egypt. And what are they doing there? And what's the background of all of this? We need to know this because we read this and we're like, and why must the wives kill the children? What's going on here? Right? And this is the history of the multiply and how many Israelites they truly were. In our minds, it stops and begins at Egypt. But before that, there's a whole history of Israel. And the whole line comes from Shem. And Shem's line is chosen for good reason. Okay, so we need to go to a bit of a backdrop in all of this. So where did you read to now?
17 I stopped, I believe, or 18.
Okay, quickly read from 19 to 22.
It says, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered, the midwives come unto them. Therefore Yahweh dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mightily. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared Yahweh, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive.
Now go to Exodus chapter 2. So they ought to kill these children of the line of Shem, which is comes all the way from Adam, all the way through Eber, all the way through Terah, all the way through Abram, all the way through Isaac, all the way through Jacob, and Jacob has 12 sons. Now it's speaking about these 12 sons. Remember where we are in this time. These 12 sons that have become a multitude of nations, like we read in Acts and in John. These nations living amongst the nations, they become many nations. Even then there were many nations. We need to remember where we are. Okay, so now let's go to Exodus chapter 2. We're going to read there from verse 1. Sorry for all the reading, Adrian. To verse
Not a problem,
19.
man.
We're busy with a history lesson here of Israel and where it's descended from and who they are. And then we're going to go into the commandments given to them. And people are not going to like it.
And listen closely to what Pharaoh's daughter is saying. All right, verse 1. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and he took a wife, a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And she saw him that he was a goodly child, and she hid him for 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him for an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off, to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. And her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark amongst the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and she said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew woman, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter. And he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and said, Because I drew him out of the water. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, and he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way. And when he saw that there was no man, he, Moses, slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thy fellow? And he said, Who made thee prince and judge over us? Intendest thou to unalive me, as thou unalived the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs of water of their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them water their flock. And when they came to Reuel their father, he said, How is it that you are come so soon this day? How far did you want me to go, brother?
Read on more.
Uh,
Until they say, she
And
said,
they,
the Egyptian man helped us.
okay. And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock.
Okay, so here we see Moses, and he's called the Egyptian man because he grew up in Egypt. He was born out of, like we read in the previous chapter, and in this chapter, out of Levi, right? He was born out of Shem's line, not Ham's line. Ham's line is the Egyptian. Misraim is the Egyptians. He's a Hebrew man, and he is now called the Egyptian, right? But there's a whole backdrop we need to understand. What are they doing in Egypt? How did they get there? What was all of that plays in context that we should know? Okay, so quickly, we need to read some things about why the children were in Egypt. So quickly go to Genesis 46, read verse 1 through 7.
Genesis 46, 1 through 7. Okay. And Israel took his journey with all that he had, and came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifices unto Yahweh of his father Isaac. And Yahweh spake unto Israel in the visions of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. And he said, I am the Elohim of thy fathers, Fear not, go down into Egypt, for I will there make thee a great nation. And I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, and their little ones, and their wives, in their wagons, which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. And they took their cattle and their goods, which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, and Jacob and all of his seed with him, and his sons sons with him, and his daughters, and his sons' daughters, and all of his seed brought he into the land of Egypt.
Okay, so yeah, Pharaoh sent wagons to go fetch Jacob and his whole household because his one son was ruler in Egypt. What is his son doing there? Quickly go to Genesis 47, read verse 5 and 6.
And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and thy brethren are come up unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle.
So Jacob is called out of the land of Canaan where he's living. How did he get to Canaan in the first place? And what's the reason? What are they doing there? And secondly, now they are called up. And when they are called up, they say in Egypt, in Mizraim, Pharaoh tells him, look, Jacob, the land lies open before you. Choose the best of the land for your crops. And they choose the land of Goshen, right? So if I can draw that for you. We'll clean this very soon. So if this is the land again, let's say this is Mitzrayim or Egypt. The whole of Egypt is here. Where Joseph and them are on a corner. It's a place called Egypt. But Egypt, this whole thing here, is called Egypt. Right? And this is where Joseph and them are in Egypt, in the capital. Right? And they give them a land way off. It's quite a way off from where they are. It's called the land of Goshen. It's like your United States. If this is the States, it's got different states in it. Egypt has got different states, and they get a land in Egypt called the land of Goshen. And this is a promise made to Jacob. But there I will multiply your seed. They live here for 400 years. They lived there. How many generations is 400 years? Do you know how many people multiplied in that time? And what were they doing there? Because they came up here from a land of Canaan. And what were they doing in Canaan? Right? So, they then eventually become slaves in Egypt, is the background of that all. So let's quickly go read in the Apocrypha a bit more about it, right? And it's going to be a lot of reading. We're going to read the book of Jasher 64, 65, 66, 67, 68 to get more about what we read about them in Genesis. It's going to give us way more background. Right? So we're going to start in Jasher chapter 64 and we're going to read all the way to chapter 68, Adrian.
Okay. It says, And Balaam, the son of Beor, was at that time with Angeas in the battle, and when he saw that Zepho prevailed over Angeas, he fled from there and came to Chittim. And Zepho and the children of Chittim received him with great honor, for Zepho knew Balaam's wisdom. And Zepho gave unto Balaam many gifts, and he remained with him. And when Zepho had returned from the war, he commanded all the children of Chittim to be numbered who had gone into battle with him, and behold, not one was missed. And Zepho rejoiced at this thing, and he renewed his kingdom, and made a feast unto all of his subjects. But Zepho remembered not Yahweh, and considered not Yahweh had helped him in the battle, and that he had delivered him and his people from the hand of the king of Africa, but still walked in the ways of the children of Chittim, the wicked children of Esau, to serve other gods, which his brethren, the children of Esau, had taught him. It is therefore said, From the wicked goes forth wickedness.
Just
And
stop there.
Zepho,
Sorry. So it says there, but still he walked in the ways of the children of Shittim, on the wicked children of Esau, which are in Africa. But Esau is out of the line of Shem. Esau is not out of the land of Canaan. So why is Esau called out of the children of Shittim, and what is he doing there? Remember these questions, because we need to answer them, because this is part of the reason why Esau was hated. So Esau comes up out of Africa, somewhere in Africa, right? Why? That's where the promise of the land is, where Abraham and them came from, Canaan. And Esau is now called evil, but he's out of the line of Shem. So what is Esau doing there? Carry on, Adrian.
And Zepho reigned over all the children of Chittim securely, but knew not Yahweh, who had delivered him and all of his people from the hand of the king of Africa. And the troops of Africa came no more to Chittim to plunder as usual, for they knew the power of Zepho, and who had smitten them at the edge of the sword. So Angeas was afraid of Zepho and the sons of Eliphaz and of the children of Chittim all the days. At that time, when Zepho had returned from the war, and when Zepho had seen how he prevailed over all the people of Africa, he had smitten them in battle at the edge of the sword. Then Zepho advised with the children of Chittim to go to Egypt to fight with the sons of Jacob and with Pharaoh's king of Egypt. For Zepho heard that the mighty men of Egypt were dead, and Joseph and his brethren and the sons at Jacob were dead, and all of their children and the children of Israel remained in Egypt. For Zepho heard that the mighty men of Egypt, did I just read that? Sorry. Yeah, verse 9. And Zepho considered to go to fight against them and all of Egypt to avenge the cause of his brethren, the children of Esau, whom Joseph with his brethren and all of Egypt had smitten in the land of Canaan when they came up to bury Jacob in Hebron. And Zepho sent messengers to Hadad.
Adrian, just hang on. So verse 9, and Zepho considered to fight against them and all Egypt. Why? Because the Israelites were in Egypt. To avenge the cause of his brethren, the children of Esau. When Joseph with his brethren and all Egypt had smitten in the land of Canaan, when they went up to bury Jacob in Hebron. Remember why Esau is fighting here. Esau is fighting with his own brothers because they wanted to bury Jacob. And remember, we'll read it later, how Esau came and said, you can't bury him here. But Abraham bought that place. Esau can't say that, and it's his own line of people. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, and Joseph knew that. Verse 10, and Zepho sent messengers to Hadad, son of Bedad, king of Edom, and to all of his brethren, the children of Esau, saying, did you not say that you would not fight against the king of Africa? For he is a member of your covenant. Behold, I fought with him and smote him and all of his people. Now therefore I have resolved to fight against Egypt and the children of Jacob who are there. And I will be revenged of them for what Joseph, his brethren, and his ancestors did to us in the land of Canaan when they came up to bury their father in Hebron. Now then, if you are willing to come to me and assist me in fighting against them at Egypt, then shall we avenge the cause of our brethren. And the children of Esau hearkened to the words of Zepho, and the children of Esau gathered themselves together, a very great people, and they went to assist Zepho and the children of Chittim in battle. And Zepho sent to all the children of the east and all the children of Ishmael with the words like unto these, and they gathered themselves and came to assistance of Zepho and to the children of Chittim in the war upon Egypt. And all these kings, the king of Edom, and the children of the east, and the children of Ishmael, and Zepho, the king of Chittim, went forth and arrayed all their host in Hebron. And the camp was very heavy, extended in length and distance of 3 days' journey, a people numerous as the sand of the seashore, which cannot be counted. And all these kings and their host went down and came against all of Egypt in battle. and encamped together in the valley of Pathros. And all of Egypt heard their report, and they also gathered themselves together, all the people of the land of Egypt, and of all the cities belonging to Egypt, about 300,000 men. And the men of Egypt sent also the children of Israel, who were in those days in the land of Goshen, to come unto them in order to go to fight with these kings. And the men of Israel assembled, and were about 150 men. And they went into battle to assist the Egyptians. And the men of Israel and of Egypt went forth, about 300,000 men and 150 men, and they went toward the king to battle, and they placed themselves from without the land of Goshen, opposite of Pathros. And the Egyptians believed not in Israel to go with them in their camps together for battle. For all the Egyptians said, perhaps the children of Israel will deliver us into the hand of the children of Esau and Ishmael, for they are brethren. And all the Egyptians said unto the children of Israel, remain you here together, and stand, and we will go fight against the children of Esau and Ishmael. And if these kings should prevail over us, then come you all together upon them and assist us. And the children of Israel did so. And Zepho, the son of Eliphaz, the son of Esau, king of Chittim, and Hadad, the son of Bedad, king of Edom, and all of their camps, and all of their children of the east, and children of Ishmael, a people numerous as the sand, encamped together in the valley of Pathros opposite of Tecophatus. And Balaam, the son of Beor, the Syrian, was there in the camp of Zepho, for he came with the children of Chittim to battle, and Balaam was a mighty, highly honored in the eyes of Zepho and all of his men. And Zepho said unto Balaam, try by divination for us, that we might know who will prevail in the battle, we or the Egyptians. And Balaam rose up and tried the art of divination, and he was skillful in the knowledge of it. But he was confused, and the work was destroyed in his hand. And he tried again, but did not succeed. And Balaam despaired of all of it, and left it, and did not complete. For this was of Yahweh, in order to cause Zepho and his people to fall in the hand of the children of Israel, who had trusted in Yahweh, their Elohim, of their ancestors in their way. And Zepho and Hadad put their forces in battle array, and all the Egyptians went alone against them, about 300,000 men, and not one man of Israel was with them. And all the Egyptians fought with these kings opposite of Pathros and I can't say that, Tachpenes, at the battle was severe against the Egyptians. And the kings were stronger than the Egyptians in the battle, and about 180 men of the Egyptians fell on that day, and about 30 men of the forces of the kings. And all the men of Egypt fled from before the kings. So the children of Esau and Ishmael pursued the Egyptians, continuing to smite them until the place for the camp of the children of Israel. And all the Egyptians cried unto the children of Israel, saying, hasten to us, and assist us, and save us from the hand of Esau and Ishmael, and the children of Chittim. And the 150 men of the children of Israel ran from their station to the camps of these kings, and the children of Israel cried unto Yahweh their Elohim to deliver them. And Yahweh hearkened to Israel, and Yahweh gave all men of the kings into their hands, and the children of Israel fought against these kings. And the children of Israel smote about 4,000 of the king's men. And Yahweh threw a great contention in the camp of the kings, so that the fear of the children of Israel fell upon them. And all the host of the kings fled from before the children of Israel, and the children of Israel pursued them, continuing to smite them unto the borders of the land of Cush. And the children of Israel slew of them in the road yet 2,000 men, and of the children of Israel not one fell. And when the Egyptians saw the children of Israel had fought with such few men, and with the kings, and the battle that was so very severe against them, All the Egyptians were greatly afraid of their lives on the account of the strong battle, and all of Egypt fled, every man hiding himself from the arrayed forces. And they hid themselves in the road, and they left the Israelites to fight. And the children of Israel inflicted a terrible blow upon the king's men, and they returned from them after they had driven them from the border of the land of Cush. And all of Israel knew the thing which the men of Egypt had done unto them, and they fled from them in the battle, and had left them to fight alone. So the children of Israel also acted with cunning. And as the children of Israel returned from battle, they found some of the Egyptians in the road, and smote them there. And whilst they slew them, they said unto them these words, Wherefore did you go from us and leave us, being but a few, to fight against these kings, who had a great people to smite us, that you might thereby deliver your own souls? And of some which the Israelites met in the road, they, the children of Israel, spoke to each other, saying, Smite, smite, for he is an Ishmaelite, or he is an Edomite, or he is from the children of Chittim. And they stood over him and slew him. And they knew that they knew that he was an Egyptian. And the children of Israel did these things cunningly against the Egyptians, because they had deserted them in battle and fled from before them. And the children of Israel slew the men of Egypt in the road in this manner, about 200 men. And all the men of Egypt saw the evil which the children of Israel had done to them. So all Egypt feared greatly the children of Israel, for they had seen their great power, and that not one man of them had fallen. So all the children of Israel returned with joy on the road to Goshen, and the rest of Egypt returned, each man to his own place.
So here, in this chapter, we get a bit more context. There's a lot of things said in this chapter. And if you know the history, it will ring a lot of bells to you. But first of all, we see that Esau calls up the kings of Africa to go fight against the children of Israel, because they say Jacob is dead. And they say the 12 sons are dead. There's a reason they're scared of the 12 sons. They were very powerful. They could shout the creed, the same creed that was given to Samson. When Samson was anointed with the Spirit, he shouted a certain creed or words, and this power was given to him. These 12 sons had the same power. So they were very scared of Jacob and his 12 sons because of the history. Their sister was raped, and two of them just go and destroy whole cities. They smash them like a sword through pumpkins, as the scripture says. But now Esau gets guts. Now Esau is out of the same line as them. Esau is also from Shem. But Esau is contentious with them because Esau married into the Hittites, which was a grief to his parents, right? And he is now living amongst the Ham's line, the Cushites and the Hittites and the Hivites and all of them. He lives amongst them. He armies up the armies, he soldiers them up, and he says, come, let's go fight in Egypt. Why? Because Israel is no longer living there. They are now living in Mitzrayim, right? In Egypt, in the land of Goshen. That's why when the Egyptians want to go down to fight Edom, Esau's people and his kings that he gathered together, they call 150 of Israelites living in Egypt out of the land of Goshen. Remember how Pharaoh said the land lays before you? There, they choose the land of Goshen, and they live there for many, many generations, right? That's why they are called 150 out of Goshen. And when they are in battle, the Egyptians cannot overcome Esau and them. Esau and them are too strong, right? Big army. And they call on the Israelites to come and help them, the 150 soldiers. The 150 slay more than 4,000 men, right? But while these Israelites are fighting, the Egyptians stop fighting. And the Israelites call back to them and say, listen guys, what evil are you doing? Come and help us. And they didn't want to help. So on their way back, after they won this war and slew the men, they find these children of Egypt on the way back. And they kill them, and they say, this one is that, and this one is of this, because of what they did, right? And that report goes to the Pharaoh at the time. Now, the Pharaoh that receives that report is not the Pharaoh that knew Joseph. It was his son, right? Remember how we asked the question and we said, what's the history of this? Why do they want to put the Israelites into bondage? They've been living in the land of Goshen, which is in Egypt, for so long. Why all of a sudden now do they want to put them in bondage? Now, this is the backdrop that we are reading of why this is happening. It starts at this war that they have with one of their brothers, Esau, because this war started when the 12 sons destroyed the armies of Esau. When they wanted to bury Jacob, Esau came along, we'll read about it later, and said, no, you can't bury here. And he says, but Abraham bought this land. Even though the Hittites here said he doesn't have to pay, he commanded to pay, to say that you didn't receive this through my money, through Thanksgiving. I paid for it, it's mine. So Jacob wants to get buried there in that same tomb, and along comes Esau of the same family, but he's living amongst the Hittites in Roni's generation, which is the evil man. And Esau comes and he stops this and he says, no. And they say, bugger this, we're going to war, because this tomb was given to our father Abraham. And Esau is smitten, and Esau holds a grudge against this. And eventually he now comes up years later to Egypt to fight the children of Shem, the descendants of Shem, right? The 12 sons of Israel. Because remember, we must now go back and remember where we are. What happened? Shem, Ham, and Japheth each got a portion of land. Ham's line starts stealing Israel's ground. Remember, it's not permitted to do that. Canaan, you will be cursed for this. And Canaan also gets cursed for that. And now Israel has no place to dwell in. Now they're going down to Canaan and coming back up and going down. Abraham does this many times. Isaac does this many times. Jacob does this many times, which we'll cover. Now all of a sudden, because of the drought, now they're living in Egypt. And when they are no longer in that land that was given to Shem, the Canaanites start taking over the land. And when they want to go back, it's always wars and contention. And Esau wants this portion, right? Because Esau is no longer of his brothers. Esau is the only one in the lineage that crossed over to Ham, right? He crossed over to Ham and then he came back into Ishmael, but he's already crossed over and he's contaminating a lot of things. So this is the backdrop of where we are now. So the Egyptians eventually now start seeing, we'll read it now in the next chapter. These Israelites are actually very powerful. Let's put them into slavery, lest they become rulers over us. They don't have a land to dwell in. They're dwelling in the land of Goshen, which the previous Pharaoh who knew Joseph said they could have. But the Pharaoh now, his son at that time, says no. Now he's going back on his bond or his covenant. Okay? So now we're going to go to the next chapter.
Says, verse 1, and it came to pass after these things that all the counselors of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all the elders of Egypt assembled and came before the king and bowed down to the ground, and they sat before him. And the counselors and the elders of Egypt spoke unto the king, saying, Behold, the children of Israel are greater and mightier than we are. And thou knowest all the evil which they did unto us in the road when we returned from battle.
Just stop
and
there.
Thou hast...
Sorry, Adrian. So, you know all the evil they did to us on the road when they went in battle. Remember the previous chapter? When they came back from battle, they slew the Egyptians because the Egyptians didn't want to help them in the war. Speaking about that. So remember the context. Okay?
Yeah. And thou hast also seen their strong power, for this power is unto them from their father. For they are few men, but stood up against a people numerous as the sand, and smote them by the edge of the sword. And of themselves not one has fallen, so that if they had been numerous, they would have been utterly destroyed. Now therefore give us counsel what to do with them, until we gradually destroy them from amongst us, lest they become too numerous for us in the land. For if the children of Israel should increase in the land, they will become an obstacle for us. And if any war should happen to take place, they with their great strength will join our enemy against us, to fight against us, to destroy us from the land and go away from it. So the king answered the elders of Egypt and said unto them, This is the plan advised against Israel, from which we will not depart. Behold, in the land of Pithom and Ramses, cities unfortified against battle, it behooves you and us to bind them and to fortify them. Now, therefore, go you also and act cunningly towards them, and proclaim a voice in Egypt and in Goshen at the command of the king, saying, all ye men of Egypt, Goshen, Pathros, and all the inhabitants, the king has commanded us to build Pithom and Ramses and to fortify them for battle. Who amongst you of all of Egypt, of the children of Israel, and all of the inhabitants of the cities are willing to build with us? Shall each have his wages given to him daily at the king's order? So you go first and do cunningly and gather yourselves and come to Pithom and Ramses to build. And whilst you are building, cause a proclamation of this kind to be made throughout Egypt every day at the command of the king. And when some of the children of Israel shall come build with you, you shall give them their wages daily for a few days. And after they shall have built with you, for a daily hire, drag yourselves away from them daily, one by one, in secret, and then you shall rise up and become their taskmasters, masters and officers, and you shall leave them afterward to build without wages, and you shall refuse them and force them with all your might to build. And if you do this, it will be well with us to strengthen our land against the children of Israel. For on account of the fatigue of the building and the work, the children of Israel will decease, because they will be deprived from their wives day by day. And all the elders of Egypt heard the counsel of the king, and the counsel seemed good in their eyes, and in the eyes of the servants of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all of Egypt. And they did according to the word of the king. And all the servants went away from the king, and they caused a proclamation to be made in all of Egypt, and in Tahpanhes and in Goshen, and in all the cities that surrounded Egypt, saying, you have seen what the children of Esau and Ishmael did to us, who came to war against us and wished to destroy us. Now therefore the king commanded us to fortify the land, to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses, and to fortify them for battle if they should come against us. Whosoever of you from all of Egypt and from all the children of Israel will come to build with us, he shall have his daily wages given to him by the king, and his commandment unto us. And when Egypt and all the children of Israel heard all the servants of Pharaoh had spoken, there came from the Egyptians and the children of Israel to build with the servants of Pharaoh, and Pithom and of Ramses, but none of the children of Levi came with their brethren to build. And all the servants of Pharaoh and his princes came first with deceit to build with all of Israel, as daily hired laborers, and they gave to Israel their daily hire at the beginning. And the servants of Pharaoh built with all of Israel, and were employed in that work with Israel for a month. And at the end of the month, all the servants of Pharaoh began to withdraw secretly from the people of Israel daily. And Israel went on with the work at that time, but they received their daily hire. Because some of the men of Egypt were yet carrying on the work with Israel at that time. Therefore the Egyptians gave Israel their hire in those days, in order that the Egyptians, their fellow workmen, might also take their pay for their labor. At the end of the year and 4 months, all the Egyptians had withdrawn from the children of Israel, so that the children of Israel were left alone, engaged in the work. And after all the Egyptians had withdrawn from the children of Israel, they returned and became oppressors and officers over them. And some of them stood over the children of Israel as taskmasters, and received from them all that they gave for their pay and their labor. And the Egyptians did in this manner to the children of Israel day by day, in order to afflict their work. And all the children of Israel were alone, engaged in labor, and the Egyptians refrained from giving their pay to the children of Israel from that time forward. And when some of the men of Israel refused to work on the account of the wages not being given to them, the extractors and the servants of Pharaoh oppressed them and smote them with heavy blows and made them to return by force to labor with their brethren. Thus did all the Egyptians unto the children of Israel all the days. And all the children of Israel were greatly afraid of the Egyptians in this manner. And all the children of Israel returned and worked alone without pay. And all the children of Israel built Pithom and Ramses, and all of the children of Israel did the work, so making bricks, and some building, and some of the children of Israel built and fortified the land of Egypt and its walls, and the children of Israel were engaged in work for many years, until the time came when Yahweh remembered them and brought them from out of Egypt. But the children of Levi were not employed in the work of their brethren of Israel, from the beginning unto that day of their going forth from Egypt. For all the children of Levi knew that the Egyptians had spoken all these words with deceit to the Israelites. Therefore the children of Levi refrained from approaching to the work of their brethren. And the Egyptians did not direct their attention to make the children of Levi work afterward, since they had not been with their brethren at the beginning. Therefore the Egyptians left them alone. And the hands of the men were directed with continued servitude against the children of Israel in that work. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel work with rigor. And the Egyptians embittered the lives of the children of Israel with hard work in mortar and bricks, and also in all manner of work of the field. And the children of Israel called Malo the king of Egypt, Meor, king of Egypt, because in the days of the Egyptians he had embittered their lives with all manner of work. And all the work wherein the Egyptians made the children of Israel labor, they extracted the rigor in order to afflict the children of Israel. But the more they afflicted them, the more they increased and grew. And the Egyptians were grieved because of the children of Israel.
So here we get a bit more knowledge on the backdrop of why we read in Genesis the children of Egypt wanted to oppress Israel, and why Israel was there. We never knew why Israel is there, but we should know this when we read the Bible, because our 66 canon Bible doesn't give us the history. It tells us they were in the land of Goshen, and it tells us that they put them into slavery. But when you read that, you think, how stupid was Israel? They had to be very dumb. But just like today, they were put in a pot with a boiling frog, and slowly the heat was turned on. They paid them the wages. They said, come, we're going to build these kingdoms. And even the Egyptians go and build, and they are given their wages, right? And that is how they deceive them. And they give their wages, and after a month, some of them start leaving one by one. And eventually only Israel is there. The pot is getting boiled, and the frog is getting boiled in the pot because the heat is being turned on. It doesn't know it's getting boiled, right? So the heat gets turned on to them, and this is how they become slaves, because they are mighty. They can easily conquer the Egyptians, but they don't, because they're not living in their own land. They know through Joseph they were given a portion in Goshen, which is not the portion given to them, which was promised a lot to Shem, that part of the land. They're living as strangers in that land. So they have to go do their work. But eventually, when they look around and years go by, they realize, it's only us. And we are now in bondage and enslaved. But note very carefully, how the Levites never went in there. The Levites, one of the tribes, right, never went into that bondage. They stayed in the corner of Goshen. They never even went up for any slavery. They are not part of Israel in Egypt. They are separated from them. Remember this, because they become the soldiers amongst them, who joins them to Israel, who are led out of Egypt. Because they weren't the bonds, the slaves in Egypt. They lived far off in a country. That's why they also left them alone. They didn't come up for the work done in Egypt. This is a history that we all should know when we read the accounts of these stories, right? And we also now see the reason why. The reason that they are going into slavery is because they saw the Israelites conquer the kingdoms of Africa very easily. And said, well, this is a mighty nation. So they know this nation can stand up with 150 men killing 4,000. I mean, how many do you need to conquer Egypt? and they start putting them into bondage and into slavery. And this is the oppression that starts on them. But the Levites, they never go up. Isn't it strange how the priests are always awake and can see through all the crap of the other nations and say, listen guys, be careful. I know you think this is a good thing that's happening, but there's a plan behind it. And they don't want to listen, even today. The tall trees do the same thing. The priesthood is standing up, the tall trees, and they're saying, listen guys, I know you like Trump and all he's doing and everything he's saying, but be careful, I can see a different plan. Even in those times it was like that. Note how that happens, but note very carefully how the Levites have nothing to do with the slavery and the bondage in Egypt. And how Joseph's house, you'll see in the scriptures, Joseph's house, Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, his sons, they have nothing to do with the bondage of the children in Egypt, because Joseph is a royal kingdom. He is crown game in Misraim because of what he did for Egypt and saved Egypt out of the hunger and the drought, the 7 good years and the 7 bad years. Remember that vision. Joseph and his household lives like royalty in Egypt, even though their brothers, they go into bondage. What I'm trying to make you see is there's way more to the story than you realize. And in that time, stop and think where we are. We're not at Mount Sinai. We're in the 400 years of slavery in Egypt. And in that 400 years of slavery in Egypt, the sons of Jacob are long gone and dead. Jacob is dead. The 12 sons are dead. It's their descendants and their descendants and their descendants for 400 years that are there now. Right? That's the context. So now you see that they're living in the land of Goshen because the Pharaoh who knew Joseph gave them the land to settle in and dwell in when it was a drought, when Jacob and them lived in Canaan. They could come up. And the land Goshen was given to them. And through all these years and generations go by, Mount Sinai has not happened yet. And these people live in the land of Goshen, and the priesthood doesn't come up. And what are they doing in Goshen? Why are they asking God to save them out of Egypt so that they can worship God the way God intended to? Does it mean that God had ways of worshiping him and laws before them? Did Abraham not keep the law, and that Abraham did not teach his law to his descendants and his children? And where did Abraham get the law from? These questions are all things that need to be answered. But note how the tribe of the Levites were awake. They never went up for bondage. They could see the trouble coming far ahead. They weren't stupid people. But also, Joseph, who was previously king in Egypt, and his descendants, they also don't do any slavery. It's the other tribes. They are all put into bondage. Okay, note this. Don't forget this. We're going to carry on with this now as we go. Next chapter, Adrian.
At that time died Hadad, the son of Bedad, king of Edom, and Samala, the Mesrika, for the country of the children of the east reigned in his place. In the 13th year of the reign of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, when he was 120, and the 25th year of the Israelites going down into Egypt, Samala had reigned over Edom 18 years. And when he had reigned, he drew forth his host to go and fight against Zepho and the sons of Eliphaz and the children of Chittim, because they had made war against Angeas, king of Africa, and they destroyed his whole army. But he did not engage with them, for the children of Esau prevented him, saying, he was their brother. So Samala listened to the voice of the children of Esau and turned back with all of his forces to the land of Edom, and did not proceed to fight against Zepho, the son of Eliphaz. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, heard this thing, saying, Samala, king of Edom, has resolved to fight the children of Chittim, and afterwards he will come to fight against Egypt. And when the Egyptians heard this matter, they increased the labor upon the children of Israel, lest the Israelites should do unto them as they did unto them in the war with the children of Esau in the days of Hadad. So the Egyptians said unto the children of Israel, hasten to do your work and finish your task, and strengthen the land, lest the children of Esau, your brethren, should come and fight against us. For on your account will they come against us. And the children of Israel did work of the men of Egypt day by day, and the Egyptians afflicted the children of Israel in order to lessen them in the land. But as the Egyptians increased the labor upon the children of Israel, so did the children of Israel increase and multiply, and all Egypt was filled with the children of Israel. And in the 125th year of Israel's going forth into Egypt, all the Egyptians saw that their counsel did not succeed against Israel, but that they had increased and grew in the land of Egypt, and the land of Goshen were filled with the children of Israel. So all the elders of Egypt and all of its wise men came before the king and bowed down to him and sat before him. And all the elders of Egypt and wise men thereof said to the king, May the king live forever. Thou didst counsel us and counsel against the children of Israel, and we did unto them according to thy word, the word of the king. But in proportion to the increase of labor, so did they increase and grow in the land. And behold, the whole country is filled with them. Now therefore, our master and king, the eyes of all the Egyptians are upon thee to give them advice with thy wisdom, by which they may prevail over Israel to destroy them or diminish them from the land. And the king answered them, saying, Give you counsel in this matter, that we may know what to do unto them. And an officer of the king's counselors, whose name was Job, from Mesopotamia in the land of Uz, answered the king, saying, If it please the king, let him hear the counsel of his servant. And the king said unto him, Speak. And Job spoke before the king, the princes, and before all the elders of Egypt, saying, Behold, the counsel of the king, which he advised us formerly, respecting the labor of the children of Israel, is very good. And you must not remove them from their labor forever. But this is the advice counseled by which you may lessen them, if it seems good to the king to afflict them. Behold, we have feared war for a long time, and we said, When Israel becomes fruitful in the land, they will drive us from the land if a war should take place. If it shall please the king, let the royal decree go forth, and let it be written in the laws of Egypt, which shall not be revoked, that every male child born to the Israelites, his blood shall be spilled upon the ground. And by your doing this, when all the male children of Israel shall have died, the evil of their wars will cease. Let the king do so and send for all the Hebrew midwives in order for this matter to be executed, so that the thing pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Job. And the king sent for the Hebrew midwives, so to be called, of which the name of one was Sapphira, and the name of the other Pua. And the midwives came before the king and stood in the presence. And the king said unto them, When you do office of a midwife of the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, you shall unalive him. But if it be a daughter, you shall save him alive. But if you will not do this thing, I will burn you up in all of the houses with fire.
Hey,
But the midwives,
Sorry, just want to interject. Sorry about that.
No
Now
problem.
note how we even get the names of the women who had to kill the children, the midwives, right? So
Yep.
here we get a lot more context of what we just read in Genesis. We get all the detail, the backdrop of the whole story, the history of Israel is now being revealed to us. But note how we previously read how they said that the Israelites are taking over all the land, meaning in that time, 120 years into their exile into Egypt, they are no longer just living in Goshen, they're starting to living in every state in Egypt. So remember how Egypt in its whole has different states. They're starting to live in all those states. They are scattered all the way to the border of Cush. Carry on.
But the midwives feared Yahweh and did not hearken to the king of Egypt, nor to his words. And when the Hebrew women brought forth to the midwife son or daughter, then the midwife do all that was necessary to the child to let it live. Thus did the midwives all the days. And this thing was told to the king, and he sent and called for the midwives and said to them, Why have you done this thing and have saved the children alive? And the midwives answered and spoke together before the king, saying, Let not the king think that the Hebrew women are as the Egyptian women, for all the children of Israel are hale, and before the midwife comes to them and they are delivered. And as for us, thy handmaids, for many days no Hebrew woman has brought forth upon us, for all the Hebrew women are their own midwives, because they are all hale. And Pharaoh heard their words and believed them in this matter. And the midwives went away from the king, and Yahweh dwelt with them, and the people multiplied and waxed exceedingly.
So here we see what we must now pick up on this history is how Israel is still in Goshen, but the Egyptians are saying they're starting to, remember we read in the beginning, they're starting to multiply and living up all the land, not just Goshen. So they are now being scattered. A bit of Israel is in Goshen and in different parts of the continent. So if I could draw it for you, this is Egypt again, the whole of Egypt. This is the capital of Egypt, where Joseph lives as royalty, where they come in for slavery and bondage. Over here you've got the Levites. They don't go up for that work. But you have different states in Egypt. And all of a sudden, they are multiplying and becoming so many that they are now Yisrael, 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 Yisrael. They're starting to live all over, even right up at the border of Cush. Why is this important? Well, you start seeing as they leave and as they send scouts into the land, all of a sudden they find Rahab. What's Rahab doing on the way to there? Where is she from? Oh, she's just a descendant living there. You start noting this, because we must not keep our heads just in Egypt. We must realize that Israel is now scattered in all the land, even though Shem's portion was a big part of land and that of Cush. Remember, Cush took it over, he stole Shem's portion, like we did in the previous teaching. Even though Shem has its own land, Israel lives as a stranger in Mitzrayim. And with this, they start increasing. Be fruitful and multiply. And the more they are oppressed, the more they start increasing. The more they expand and living in different areas. And everywhere Israel goes, this is how Yahweh works. He put them into there so that they can have a root down. If I could draw the Nile, let's say this is, for example, the Nile going down to Cush. They start expanding Israel all along this Nile, even up above the Red Sea. Israel is living, because Israel is no longer here. They're in bondage, and so some of them are fleeing this slavery, and they're living all over. And then they are called to come and work, but some of them flee and live in different places. Yahweh is placing food for them and care for them all the way down to the land promised to Shem, the covenant to Shem, the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Shem's portion. Shem has nothing to do with Ham or Mitzrayim. Okay? So keep that in mind. Why are we doing this? I'm trying to show you how Israel is now multiplying and living all over the land of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim eventually falls part in a part is part of Cush or Canaan, same brothers, right? So Ham, which is the Cushites, is out of Ham, and Mitzrayim, the brothers, they intermarry and they mix. Israel never does that, and they are seen as royal game. The people hate them for it. Even today, if you say do not mix, they hate you for it, right? We'll get into that when we get back to Abraham again. Carry on, Adrian.
There was a man in the land of Egypt of the seed of Levi, whose name was Amram, the son of Ketra, the son of Levi, and the son of Israel. This man went and took a wife, namely Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, his father's sister, and she was 126 years old. and he came unto her. And the woman conceived and bare a daughter, and she called her name Miriam, because in those days the Egyptians had embittered their lives of the children of Israel. And she conceived again and bare a son, and called his name Aaron. For in the days of her conception Pharaoh began to spill the blood of all the male children of Israel. In those days Zepho the son of Eliphaz, son of Esau, king of Chittim, and Janias reigned in his stead. And at that time Zepho reigned over the children of Chittim, was 50 years, and he died, and was buried in the city of Nabna in the land of Chittim. And Janias, one of the mighty men of the children of Chittim, reigned over him, and he reigned for 50 years. And it was after the death of the king of Chittim that Balaam, the son of Beor, fled from the land of Chittim. And he went up and came to Egypt to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Pharaoh received him with great honor, for he had heard of his wisdom, and he gave him presents and made him counselor, and aggrathized him. I don't know what that word is. And Balaam dwelt in Egypt in honor with all the nobles of the king. And the nobles exalted him, because they all converted to learn his wisdom. In the 113th year of Israel's going down into Egypt, Pharaoh dreamed that he was sitting upon his kingly throne, and he lifted up his eyes and saw an old man standing before him. And there were scales in the hands of the old man. Such scales are used by the merchants. And the old man took the scales and hung them before Pharaoh. And the old man took all the elders of Egypt and all the nobles and great men, and he tied them together and put them in one scale. And he took a milk kid and put it into the other scale, and the kid preponderated all over. And Pharaoh was astonished at this dreadful vision, why the kid should preponderate over all. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And Pharaoh rose up early in the morning and called all of his servants and related to them the dream. And the men were greatly afraid. And the king said to the wise men, Interpret, I pray you, the dream which I dreamed, that I may know it. And Balaam, the son of Beor, answered the king and said unto him, This means nothing else but a great evil that will spring up against Egypt in the latter days. For a son will be born to Israel, who will destroy all of Egypt and all the inhabitants, and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. Now therefore, O king, counsel upon this matter, that you may destroy the hope of the children of Israel and their expectation, before this evil arise against Egypt. And the king said unto Balaam, And what shall we do unto Israel? Surely after a certain manner did we at the first counsel against them, and could not prevail over them. Now therefore give you also advice against them, by which we may prevail over them. And Balaam answered the king, saying, Send now and call thy 2 counselors, and we will see what their advice is upon this matter. Afterward thy servant will speak. And the king sent and called his 2 counselors, Reuel the Midianite, and Job the Uzite. And they came and sat before the king. And the king said unto them, Behold, you have both heard the dream which I have dreamed, and the interpretation thereof. Now therefore give counsel, and know and see what is done to the children of Israel, whereby we may prevail against them, before evil shall spring up against us. And Reuel the Midianite answered, and the king said, May the king live forever. If it seem good to the king, let him desist from the Hebrews and leave them, and let him not stretch forth his hand against them. For these are they whom Yahweh chose in the days of old, and took as a lot of his inheritance from amongst all the nations of the earth and the kings of the earth, and who there is now stretched his hand against them impiety, and from Yahweh their Elohim was not avenged? Surely thou knowest that when Abram went down to Egypt, Pharaoh, the former king of Egypt, saw Sarah his wife, and took her for a wife, because Abraham said, she is my sister, for he was afraid lest the men of Egypt should slay him on the account of his wife. And when the king of Egypt had taken Sarah, Yahweh smote him and his household with heavy plagues, until he restored unto Abraham his wife Sarah. Then he was healed. And Abimelech the Gerite, king of the Philistines, Yahweh punished on account of Sarah, wife of Abraham, and stopping up every womb from man to beast. When their Elohim came to Abimelech in a dream of the night and terrified him in order that he might restore to Abraham Sarah, whom he had taken. And afterward all the people of Gerar were punished on account of Sarah, and Abraham prayed to Yahweh for them, and he entreated to him and healed them. And Abimelech feared all the evil that came upon him and his people. And he returned to Abraham his wife Sarah, and gave him with her many gifts. And he did so also unto Isaac when he had driven from Gerar, and what Yahweh had done wonderful things to him, that the watercourses of Gerar were dried up, and their productive trees did not bring forth. Unto Abimelech of Gerar, and Azuath of one of his friends of Pichiol, of the captain of his host, went to him, and they bent down before him to the ground. And they requested to him to supplicate for them. And he prayed to Yahweh for them, and Yahweh was entreated and healed them. Jacob also was a plain man that was delivered through his integrity from the hand of his brother Esau, and from the hand of Laban the Syrian, his mother's brother, whom they had sought his life, likewise from the hand of all the kings of Canaan, who came together against him and his children to destroy them. And Yahweh delivered them out of their hands, and they turned upon and smote them, for they had ever stretched forth his hand against them with impunity. Surely Pharaoh, the former, thy father's father, raised Joseph, the son of Jacob, above all the princes of the land of Egypt, when he saw his wisdom and thought his wisdom, and he rescued all the inhabitants of the land from famine. After which he ordered Jacob and all of his children to come down to Egypt, in order that they might, that through their virtue the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen might be delivered from the famine. Now therefore, if it seem good in thy eyes, cease from destroying the children of Israel. But if thou wilt not, they shall dwell in the land of Egypt. Send forth from here, and they may go to the land of Canaan, the land where their ancestors sojourned. And when Pharaoh heard the words of Jethro, he was very angry with him, so that he rose up with shame from the king's presence, and went to Midian, his land, and he took Joseph's stick. This is important. He took Joseph's stick with him. And the king said unto Job the Uzite, What sayest thou, Job? And what is thy advice respecting the Hebrews? And Job said to the king, Behold, all the inhabitants of the land are in thy power. Let the king do as it seem good in his eyes. And the king said unto Balaam, What doest thou say, Balaam? Speak thy word, that we may hear it. And Balaam said unto the king, Of all the kings has counseled against the Hebrews, they will be delivered, and the king will not be able to prevail over them with any counsel. For if thou thinkest to lessen them by the flaming fire, thou cannotest prevail over them, for surely their Elohim delivered Abraham, their father, from the Ur of Chaldees. And thou thinkest to destroy them with sword. Surely Isaac their father was delivered from it, and Ram was in his stead. And if with hard and rigorous labor thou thinkest to lessen them, thou wilt not prevail even in this. For their father Jacob served Laban in all manner of hard work, and prospered. Now therefore, O king, hear my words. For this is the counsel which you counseled against them, by which thou wilt prevail over them, and from which thou shouldest not depart. If it please the king, let him order all the children which shall be born from this day forward to be thrown into the water. For by this thou canst wipe away their name, for none of them and none of their fathers were tried in this manner. And the king heard the words of Balaam, and this thing pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Balaam. And the king ordered the proclamation to be issued, and the law to be made throughout all the land of Egypt, saying, Every male child born of the Hebrews from this day forward shall be thrown into the Nile, or the water. And Pharaoh called unto his servants, saying, Go now and seek throughout the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel are, and see that every son born of the Hebrews shall be cast into the river, but every daughter you shall let live. And when the children of Israel heard this thing, Pharaoh had commanded to cast the male children into the river. Some of the people separated from their wives, and others adhered them. And from that day forward, when the time would be delivered arose to the women of Israel, whom had remained with their husbands, they went to the field bringing forth there, and they brought forth in the field, and left their children upon the field, and returned home. And Yahweh, who had sworn to their ancestors to multiply them, set one of his ministering angels, which are in heaven, to wash each child in the water, to anoint and swaddle it, and to put its hands two smooth stones. From of one is struck with milk, and from the other honey. And he caused their hair to grow to its knees, by that which it might cover itself in comfort, and to cleave to it through his compassion for it. And when Yahweh had compassion over them, he had desired to multiply them upon the face of the land, and ordered his earth to receive them, to be preserved therein till the time that they're growing up, after which the earth had opened its mouth and vomited them forth, and they sprouted forth from the city like an herb of the earth, and the grass of the forest. And they returned, each to his family, and each to his father's house, and remained with them. And the babes of the children of Israel were upon the earth like the herb of the field, though Yahweh's grace to them. Through Yahweh's grace. And when all the Egyptians saw this thing, they went forth, each to his field, and his yoke of his oxen and plowshare, and they plowed it up, as the plows of the earth at seed time. And when they plowed, they were unable to hurt the infants of the children of Israel. So the people increased and waxed exceedingly. And Pharaoh ordered his officers daily to go to Goshen, and to seek the babes of the children of Israel. And when they had sought and found one, they took it from the mother's bosom by force, and threw it into the river. But the female child they left with its mother, and the Egyptians do to the Israelites all the days.
So here's a lot of context of what happens, which we don't get in the 66 canon Bible. So we wanted to initially know, why are Israel why do they want to put Israel into slavery, and what is Israel doing in Egypt, in the land of Goshen, right? And then in this we start seeing the vision of Moses being born, and Moses will rule and lead them out of Egypt, and Pharaoh gets scared and he starts killing the children of Israel. But they are children of Israel, but they're also called the Hebrews. Make careful note of that, because people tend to forget that Shem's line is a promise that they will keep the Hebrew language. Even though they forget it, they learn it again eventually. They will keep that Hebrew language, but when they are finally scattered, it says they will all forget the language, and they will be called back to the pure language again. That must still happen, and it's happening now. It's happening when we say Yahweh, Yeshua, when we say the Ruach. We are starting to understand these things. We are waking up, right? And then these children that these women had to go and kill, and when the other woman gave birth, Yahweh hides them away all over in the whole of Egypt. But note how he takes care of them. The angel comes down and gives each one a stone. One he suckles milk, and one he suckles honey with. Yahweh truly loves the children of Israel. He takes care of those little children. It's something very special to him. He chose them out of all the nations to be his possession. He calls them the firstborn son of his possession, because they are the firstborn out of all the nations that God took for himself. The Messiah is called the firstborn son because he's the first to raise from the dead. Two separate things. The next one is, note, when they're living in this wilderness without their parents, suckling on the rock with one milk and one honey, learning of the truth of Yahweh also at the same time, they are not clothed. He makes their hair grow up to their knees so it can be a covering for them. Right? If these were, and I don't mean this with any enmity or harsh words towards anyone. If this were, for example, the children of Ham, whose hair can only grow up into an afro, how does it go down to their knees, people? Okay? Second point. They get the 2 stones to suckle on. They get clothing, all of this. And they are protected. So in this whole land of Egypt, Pharaoh wants to kill them, but the children are where? Hidden away. Eventually they go out with their plows to try and kill them, because these little children are like little runts running everywhere. Right? See this picture. Take time, refrain, and see where we are in this picture. So not only are the Israelites who are slaves in Egypt only there, their offspring is now running wild all over the country. They are all over. In our minds, when we say Israel, we all think, they're all together in one place. No. Joseph, Ephraim, Manasseh is not in slavery. Levi is not in slavery. And all the other tribes' descendants, they are not in slavery. They are hidden away in the bush, given 2 rocks and clothing. Their hair starts covering their knees. People forget about them. They don't realize these are the strangers who joined them and soldier amongst them eventually. Same children. They are called the Gentiles. They're not in Egypt in slavery. They join them to them as their sojourner. The reason I'm saying this is I want you to see the history and the context of Israel and what's happening. In our minds, they are all, if this was Egypt, right? In our minds, they are all in one place. You don't realize they are all over now. These children are all protected. They are being scattered and placed in certain places for a reason. Remember when Joseph was sold by his brothers, the other 11 brothers? They sold him and Joseph became Pharaoh in Egypt, right? And eventually there's a drought in Jacob's time, and they all have to come up. And eventually he sends them back to go and fetch their father. But before they go back, Joseph stands there and he sees the mourning of his brothers, and their hearts are very sore for what they did to Joseph. And he says, "Do not be troubled on your journey, brothers. Don't be contempt and sad about what you have done to me. For this was the will of Yahweh, so that the seed of Abraham can prolong and continue. You had to sell me, so that I had to gather up this food, so that my family would not perish in a land that was promised to them, so that they can come up and have a descendants." This was the whole plan of Yahweh. These children is the same thing. They are not just in the bush and living there as wild animals for nothing. They are there because they become mighty, mighty, mighty warriors. Those children, the descendants, the children that are the warriors, and why I say they are warriors, in the genealogy, if you go back, you can see in the Apocrypha, one woman takes a son and she has to let him go, and she starts crying, and the angel appears and says to the woman, "Don't worry, Yahweh will give him food to eat and something to drink and a covering," the 2 rocks and the hair. And one of those children go up all the way in his descendants to one of the most bravest soldiers David ever had. Why? Because they were rough and tough. They were tough people. They grew up a very hard way. But they become the mighty men in the ranks in the armies. Children you do not want to mess with. Children that grew up in the wilderness, that God himself fed and took care of. That was the plan of God all along. In the same way that the plan that Joseph was sold is the plan with these children hidden away. But what I want you to note is stand back and see how Israel is no longer just in Gooson. They are now all over because Pharaoh sends his soldiers to Gershon every time to go and kill them. So they can't be there. They are now moving out and away to all different places all over this continent. And they start growing up there. Hebrew speaking people out of the line of Shem. Now, people get very confused. They say, for example, the covenant is only Israel, and Israel are only the children who are born out of Jacob, which is true, 100% true. But they are all Hebrew speaking, all fall down up to Terah, all the way back to Adam. There's a line that Yahweh has always kept there. And the only one who starts crossing that line is called hated by Yahweh in Scripture, and that is Esau, who goes into the Hivites and the Hittites, brings it over to Ishmael, who's also promised to be a mighty 12 nations, and then goes and marries into Roni, who's in the land of Shire, the kingdom of Shire, and there's a huge mixing happening there. But what I want you to note, and I want you to really, really step back and realize where we are. We now, even just before Moses, but we went to Abraham. We're still going to go to Abraham out of the land of Ur. We're still going to go into how Abraham soldiered down to Canaan, came back up, went down again, came back up. All of those things are very relevant because every time they travel, they leave a remnant behind. For example, when Abraham is called up to Egypt, he leaves a remnant behind in the place that his homestead where the well is, at the big tree. He leaves a remnant there to look after the homestead when he's gone, right? And then he goes back and he finds everything fine. But note, Yahweh promised to Abraham a land overflowing with milk and honey. That was the promise of the covenant. But when Abraham went there, the land was good and everything was good, but the houses weren't built yet. Brings them up into slavery for 400 years, so that the people who stole the land of Shem can build their houses and do everything. So that when Israel journeys out of Egypt, they get to a land where everything is built for them. They don't have to lift a finger. Where the grapes are as big that 2 men have to carry it on a vine. Where the houses are built in kingdoms. Where Caleb goes up to the mountains and kills the giants and finds mansions and he starts living there. It's built for him. This is how Yahweh works. He prepares the land for them according to his promise. How beautiful is it not? Okay? Last chapter in Jasher, where we are now, Adrian.
Okay. Let's see. And it was at that time when the Spirit of Yahweh was upon Miriam, the daughter of Amram, the sister of Aaron, and she went forth and prophesied about the house, saying, Behold, a son will be born unto us from my father and my mother at this time, and he will save Israel from the hands of Egypt. And when Amram heard this, the words of his daughter, he went and took a wife and went back to the house. And after he had driven her away at the time when Pharaoh ordered every male child of the house of Jacob to be thrown into the water. So Amram took Jochebed his wife 3 years after and had driven her away, and he came to her and she conceived. And at the end of the 7 months of her conception, she brought forth a son, and the whole house was filled with a great light, as a light of the sun and the moon at the same time of their shining. And when the woman saw the child, that it was good and pleasing to the sight, she hid it for 3 months in the inner room. In those days, the Egyptians conspired to destroy all the Hebrews there. And the Egyptian woman went to Goshen, where the children of Israel were, and they carried their young ones up on their shoulders and their babes who could not yet speak. And in those days, when the women of the children of Israel brought forth, each woman had hidden her son from before the Egyptians, that the Egyptians might not know their bringing forth, and might not destroy them from the land. And the Egyptian women came to Goshen, and their children, who could not speak, were upon their shoulders. And when an Egyptian woman came into the house of a Hebrew woman, her babe began to cry. And when it cried, the child that was in the inner room answered it, so that the Egyptian woman went and told the house of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh sent his officers to take the children and slay them. Thus did the Egyptians to the Hebrew women all the days. And it was at this time, about 3 months from Jochebed's concealment of her son, that the thing was known in Pharaoh's house. And the woman hastened to take her son before the officers came. She took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put her child therein, and she laid him in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister Miriam stood afar off to know that would be done to him, and what would become of her words. And Yahweh sent forth at that time a terrible heat in the land of Egypt, which burned up the flesh of men like the sun of the circuit, and greatly oppressed the Egyptians. And all the Egyptians went down to bathe in the river on the account of the consuming heat which burned up their flesh. And Bathia, the daughter of Pharaoh, went also to bathe, owning to the river consuming heat, and her maidens walked at the riverside, and all the women of Egypt as well. And Bathia lifted up her eyes to the river and saw the ark upon the water, and she sent forth to fetch it. And she opened it, and she saw a child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and she said, This is one of the Hebrew children. And all the women of Egypt walking on the riverside desired to give him suck, but he would not suck, for this thing was from Yahweh, in order to restore him to his mother's breast. And Miriam, his sister, was at that time amongst the Egyptian women at the riverside, and she saw this thing, and said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go fetch a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the young woman went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to Jochebed, Take this child away and suckle it for me, and I will pay thee thy wages, 2 bits of silver daily. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And at the end of the 2 years, the child grew up, and she brought forth to him, to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was unto her as a son, and she called his name Moses. For she said, Because I drew him of the water. And Amram, his father, called his name Chabar, for he had said, It was for him that he associated with his wife, whom he had turned away. And Jochebed, his mother, called his name Jechruel, because she said, I have hoped for him to the Almighty Elohim restored him unto me. And Miriam, his sister, called him Jared, for he had descended after him to the river to know what would be the end. And Aaron, his brother, called his name Abri-Zanuk, saying, My father left my mother and returned to her on this account. And Kayath, the father of Amram, called his name Abrigdor, because on this account did Yahweh repair the breach of the house of Jacob, and they could no longer throw their male children into the water. And their nurse called him Abri-Sako, saying, In this tabernacle was he hidden for 3 months, on the account of the children of Ham. And all Israel called his name Shemaiah, the son of Nethiel, for they said, In the days Yahweh heard their cries and rescued them from their oppressors. And Moses was in Pharaoh's house, and was unto Bathia Pharaoh's daughter as a son, and Moses grew up amongst the king's children.
Again, we read about the Hebrews, right? Hebrews of the line of Shem, and they were oppressed on the account of the sons of Ham. Not only Canaan, not only Put, but also now it became Mitzrayim, Egypt. The accounts of Ham, the sons. Who hates them? All the sons of Ham. Mitzrayim, Put, Canaan, all of them hate them. Not only did Ham come up to fight against them, and Canaan, But now Mitzrayim is also hating them, trying to kill them. And see how beautiful it is. Yahweh, like I explained earlier, always looks after the children of a promise of his covenant in such a way that this is the prophecy of Moses is hidden in the basket in the river, and how he grows up in the house of Pharaoh and is called the Egyptian, even though he's the Hebrew Egyptian. He's out of Shem, not out of Mitzrayim, not out of Put, not out of Canaan, right? He's that child, and Yahweh loves it so much that he even makes his own mother breastfeed him. In the same Pharaoh's house and room that commands that all of them must be killed. How does Yahweh work? Right? But note, all along they are called Hebrews and they are hated by the sons of Ham. Ham's line hates Israel. Israel is not only out of Jacob. Israel descend all the way from Shem, all the way back to Adam. There's a line preserved throughout all scripture. No one can deny the line. We'll go into the genealogies at a much later state. This leads up to it. All we're doing now is giving you history of Israel, how they are scattered, what happened behind your 66 canon Bible that you are stuck to. There's a whole history that you would not know if you did not read this and understand this. This is a history to be known to all. You'll see, especially when it comes to Abraham. There's a huge history there that we don't know. Even though we must have faith like Abraham, for some reason we don't know the whole history of Abraham and why, how many times he went down to the land promised him and how many times he went back up. All these things are important because he leaves remnants behind as he sojourns and does it because he becomes a sojourner in a land that he does not know. Okay? So all of this leads up to what we read in Exodus, right? How the Pharaoh, not the first Pharaoh who knew Joseph, the second one, the son, why they put them into slavery, why they wanted to kill them, why they wanted to throw them in the river, how Yahweh protects them, how when Yahweh protects them, he starts increasing the seed of Israel so that they can start living, not just in the land of Goshen, but all over. So the big picture of all this history, I want you to realize that it goes way further than Egypt. Even before that, but in Egypt and before Egypt, Israel is not just in one place. They are starting to live all over the continent. All over. So when Yahweh says this one or that one cannot enter the congregation, we must start realizing, okay, but who is he speaking about? Is it because Moses is an Egyptian, or is Moses just called the Egyptian because he grew up, he's named after the country of his origin? And when other people start entering the covenant, who are they and where are they from? Was Yahweh, let every man be a liar, but Yahweh's words be true. If Yahweh says only the covenant will come to Israel and only Israel can come in, why are we making him a liar? Or did Peter, when he cast his net not to the lost sheep, but just other nations and Gentiles, like Mitzrayim, Put, Canaan, did he cast his net to them too? Questions that need to be answered, correct? So, that being said, quickly go to 2 Maccabees, chapter 1.
1 second. Okay.
Chapter 1, verse 1 to 3.
Okay, it says, the Jews in Jerusalem and those in the land of Judea, to their Jewish kindred in Egypt, greetings and true peace. May Yahweh do good to you, and may he remember his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, his faithful servants. May he give to you all a heart to worship him and to do all of his will with a strong heart and a willing spirit.
Read verse 1 again and name the places where the Jews are, the Hebrews. Verse 1.
It says the Jews in Jerusalem and those in the land of
Jerusalem, yes.
Judea.
Judea, province in Jerusalem, yes,
and their Jewish kindred in Egypt.
in Egypt. Question: is all of Israel in one place, or are
No.
they scattered? Some of the descendants who are still in Egypt is of the royalty house of Joseph, who never went into bondage, never went into slavery, because of what Joseph did. That's why you'll see later when we read, Ephraim and Manasseh come and join themselves to Israel. They come out of Egypt and join them to go into the promised land, the sojourners amongst them. What I'm trying to make you guys see and understand is, in our mind, we connect everything back to Mount Sinai or just to Egypt, but there's a whole history before that. In the same way, in our mind, when we say the children of Israel or the promise of Shem, the land of Shem, those people all live in one place, not realizing, no, there's a whole history before they go out of Egypt, that Israel is not just only in Egypt, but living all over the place. Those little children have started all over. The Levites are at one side. Some of the other tribes who didn't all do slavery are also living over, because they didn't all go up to Egypt. They started scattering from Goshen all over the land. Their seed started increasing. The more they were oppressed, the more the seed was increasing, the more the woman hid the children, the more of them survived. This is the backdrop in the history of Scripture, that you, Baal priests, should know, claiming that you know the law, claiming to be teachers of the law, yet you do not know the laws of God. This history is very, very important. So, just to show you how they lived all over, quickly go to the book of Jasher.
Okay.
Okay? So, what I want you to see, and we'll cover the Tower of Babel, right? But in the Tower of Babel, all people had one language, Hebrew. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Only Shem keeps the Hebrew language and the line, and through his descendants, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons. These others don't. Okay? So there's a scattering at Babel, the language are forgotten, and then we go to Scripture and see, Abraham starts learning the language again. Abraham starts being obedient. Where does he learn the language? He goes to his forefathers, I think it's Noah, if I'm not mistaken. And they go or descendants thereafter. And he goes and learns the law, and he starts learning the language again. And then Abraham is loved, Isaac is loved, Jacob is loved. They always go back to learn the Hebrew language. So it's not just about Israel, even though the covenant is locked to Israel. Israel, Isaac, Jacob, they are all out of the same line. They are all the Hebrews. Right? So, quickly, before you read chapter 10 there, just read Jasher chapter 9 verse we'll read chapter 9 and chapter 10. I want to show you how they start living all over, not just in one place. So it will be, when should we end the live to start again, Adrian?
I guess when we're done with chapter 10.
Because we're going to read chapter 9 and chapter 10, yes. And then I just want to read something in chapter 13, just a paragraph.
Okay. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, it says, in Haran, the son of Terah, Abram's oldest brother, took a wife in those days. Haran was 39 years old when he took her. And the wife of Haran conceived and bare a son and called his name Lot. And she conceived again and bare a daughter and called her name Milcah. And again conceived and bare a daughter and called her name Sarai. Haran was 42 years old when he begat Sarai, which was in the 10th year of the life of Abram. In those days, Abram and his mother and nurse went out from the cave, and the king and his subjects had forgotten the affair of Abram. And when Abram came out of the cave, he went to Noah and to his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instructions of Yahweh and his ways. And no man knew where Abram was. And Abram served Noah and Shem, his son, for a long time. And
Adrian,
Abram, yep,
sorry to interrupt you. As you're reading
no
and I'm
problem.
listening, my mind is going to references. And
Yeah, me too.
so I just want to maybe end this live and we'll come back and we'll start off here because this is going to also have a whole lot of references to it.
Well, I'm also thinking about we skipped over what happens to Abram.
We'll get to that. Well, I'm still going to go deep into Abraham. I'm just trying to give a background first.
Okay.
Because they say
So,
it's 2 hours and 30 minutes now. So let's end it here. Take a break for 5 or 10 minutes, come back, and then we carry on here at Joshua chapter 10.
okay, sounds good.
Thanks, man.